Okay, so just reflecting on my previous episode there in relation to the independent thirds of yourselves, the body, mind and soul, and how if you're only using 1/3 of them, call it the mind, and you're thinking about something, you're ruminating about something. I was saying that your body can't hear you because your body uses its ears to hear, and the mind is somewhat distinct from the body, so the body can't hear your internal thoughts. And I wasn't sure where the soul came into this. And what I wanted to try and figure out was, how could you get your soul involved? Because if by talking out loud you get your body involved, because your body's physical ears can now essentially hear your mind, what can you do or say to involve your soul? And then I was thinking that the soul doesn't understand words, but it does understand narrative. So words in and of themselves aren't going to make you feel bad. Like if somebody just strings incoherent words together, that's not going to evoke an emotion as such. But if somebody tells a story about how much of a dickhead you are, that will evoke an emotion. Another thing, so the soul, as I've came to understand it, or as I understand it as of now at least, it understands narrative as opposed to language. So it gets stories, and it also gets hyperbole, I think. So when you make exaggerations, or when you make analogies, and I think analogies are just another form of story to a degree. So if you want to convince somebody on a deeper level than on a thoughtful, mindful level, if you really want to hammer home a point, give them an analogy, or give them a narrative, or better yet, give them a fucking analogy in the form of a narrative, and put it into terms that all three parts of them can understand. So what that had me thinking was, maybe instead of just speaking out loud, maybe if I wrote some prose or some poetry or something and read that aloud, would that bring in my more soulful side and include it in the conversation? And I'm not entirely sure about that, to be honest with you, but what thinking about all of that has made me think of is, originally Fionn started this story. He was saying that, you know, he's overthinking going back to school, and what I'm thinking now is, if I can get him to talk about it more out loud. So overthink by all means, so long as you do it out loud, because that's another thing that I've learned over the years is, and it's why people will often give you the advice of, whatever you're ruminating about, write it down. Because I'll be in my head and I'll be going, you're such a fucking loser, you're such a fucking loser, you're such a fucking loser, you're shit at running, and you're shit at martial arts, and you're shit at running a business, and you're a fucking loser, and you're a bad husband, and you're a bad dad, and you're fucking, and I'll have all that on a loop in me fucking head. But the advice of writing it down, I find, is great. Not that I write it down too often, but I think the advice is solid, because when you write it down, you'll start with, I'm a fucking loser. Then you'll go, I'm a shit dad, I'm a shit husband, I'm a shit runner, I'm a shit martial artist, I'm a shit businessman. And you'll get to a point whereby you'll go, I'm a shit dad. Oh no, fuck, I wrote that already. Scribble that out. I'm a loser. Oh no, I wrote that already. I'm a shit friend. Yeah, hand that down, okay. I'm a shit dad. Oh no, I have that there. The point being that you won't write down, I'm a loser, 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 I'm a loser. But you will do that in your head. You repeat these things well, I will anyway. You repeat these things endlessly in your head. That's what rumination is. It's just you fucking, your mind ruminating and going over and over the same fucking shit over and over again. But if you write it down, you're far less likely to write the same sentence down 100 times than you are repeat the same sentence in your fucking head 100 times. So there's an element of exercising these things out of you when you write them down in particular, because when you write them down, there they remain on the page. But when you say it out loud, it's better than just having it in your head. But it's better again to physically write it down, because it exists there in front of you in your visual field. And maybe that's just another part of it. Maybe by saying it out loud, you're involving your ears. By writing it down, you're involving your eyes. So maybe getting away from body, mind and soul and us being three component parts. Maybe if we divide it up a different way and say that when you're thinking about things, your mind is involved. When you think about things out loud, your mind and your ears are involved. When you think about things out loud and you write them down, you know, your visual cortex, your audio cortex, your mind more generally, you're involving more parts of you. And maybe the more parts of you that you can involve, the more chance of integration there is. Because we rhyme off this notion of I, of me, of you or him or her, as though it's this one individual thing. And it is to a degree one individual thing, but it's also a sum of its parts thing. And maybe this next analogy has come to light because I'm fucking driving a vehicle, but when you have trouble with your vehicle and you bring it to the mechanic and you tell them that, I don't know, you can't get into fifth gear, or it's down on power, you know, you can't get over fucking 60 kilometers an hour, or maybe it's the whole vehicle it's constantly pulling to the left, or it's smoky, or it's loud, or there's lights coming up in the dash, or whatever. Let's say, for example, when you put the foot on the brake, it's very slow for the vehicle to stop. Your mechanic doesn't start taking off the wheels and making sure that, you know, the way they've been put on is right. Or they don't start, you know, taking the doors apart to see if maybe there's a problem there. They're looking at the brake pads, and they're looking at the connection between the brake pedal and the brake pads. They're not looking at the entire unit. And we do this in medicine as well. So, you know, we have specialist people who, you know, you go to an eye doctor with a fucking problem for your eyes, and you go to an ear doctor for a problem with your ears, and blah, blah, blah. Like, these are all specialists. Now, we do have GPs, which are more general practitioners. So they don't have the depth of knowledge about any one particular part of you, but they've got a good understanding of you as a whole, or at least they're supposed to. And I wonder, is there something to that in relation to the more mental side of ourselves, the more psychological side, the philosophical side maybe? I don't know, there's the psychological side of it. Now, we do have psychiatrists and psychologists, of course, and therapists. But I don't know if we have kind of GPs of the mind. Somebody who looks at, or GPs of you, because a GP, like a doctor, say, that's very much body focused. They're not particularly interested in your mind, and they're certainly not interested in your fucking soul. You go to a therapist then, whether it's a psychologist or a psychotherapist or even a psychiatrist, they're not overly interested in the body at all. They're interested in the mind. And then I suppose priests and shamans and imams and all these different kind of spiritual leaders, for want of a better term, they're less interested in the mind and less interested in the body and more interested in the soul. And I'm trying to think back now to what sent me in this direction in the first place. Yeah, so I was talking to Fionn about him worrying, and I was trying to figure out, how do I get the soul involved? If I'm involving the body by talking out loud and therefore my ears can hear, and if I'm writing it down so that my eyes can hear, that's two distinct ways that I'm involving the body. Well, how do I involve the soul? But the soul is already involved, because from the outset what Fionn said was he's overthinking, and that's causing him to be nervous and anxious. And nervousness and anxiousness, they're soulful products. That's the, like when you're talking about anxiety and nervousness, like that's the realm of emotions. So the soul is already involved. You don't have to, maybe you don't have to do anything. Maybe you don't have to write poetry or fucking sing yourself a fucking song or write it down in a narrative format or use hyperbole or analogies. Maybe you don't have to do that at all. Your soul is always online, because you've always some form of an emotion, even as I mentioned earlier, even if that emotion is meh. Like you can, like what is it like to be unemotional, devoid of all emotion? Like if you're permanently on an even keel, you're never up or down. I think people will consider that to be somewhat emotionless, which is a bit of an oxymoron, because meh, like the feeling of meh is an emotion. It might be a very bland, vanilla emotion, but it's an emotion nonetheless. So maybe emotions aren't, as I think I said earlier in a previous episode, aren't as binary as I might have thought. Maybe they're not good or bad. Maybe again, it's a trinity in and of itself. Maybe it's bad, meh, and good. Is that the range? Is that the range of human emotion? Bad, meh, and good. But it's certainly food for thought, because like Fionn is struggling at the minute with this notion of going to school, and you know, I think that's a good proxy for you worrying about whatever it is that you're worrying about. Not being able to afford that handbag, not being able to get an erection, not being able to pay your mortgage. Like, you know, the things that we worry about can't be compared objectively, because I could be worrying about not that I am, but I could be worrying about my business, about how financially stable my business is, and somebody could be worrying about whether or not they're going to wear the green dress or the pink dress to the wedding. And objectively, fucking hell, your man who's worrying about his business, oh fucking hell, I'd much prefer to be worrying about the dress. Jesus Christ, fuck that. Like you know, worrying about your business, that's important. But you can be, you know, concerned about your business and not absolutely stressed out of your fucking mind about it. And you can be worrying about what colour dress to wear and be absolutely stressing out of your fucking mind about it. So the things that are causing us great stress are the things that are causing us great stress. whether or not you think your marriage is over or whether you're worried about starting school next week. Like, the objectiveness of the thing you're worrying about is irrelevant in comparison to how much fucking stress it's imposing on the body. Because I reckon that you could literally be more worried about not having milk for your tea in the morning than somebody else could be about their marriage collapsing. Because if you've already come to terms with your marriage collapsing and you're not that fucking bothered about it, you know, whatever fucking, what will be, get on with it, get over it. Like, you could be there are people, I'm sure, that have the capacity to be quite blasé about their marriage being over. And then there are people who will freak the absolute fuck out if they don't have milk for their tea in the morning. So I think different anxieties that we all kind of suffer are purely subjective. There's very little objectivity about it. And it's like subjectivity, I wonder, is not a soulful domain. Because the mind is very objective. The mind is, you know, which is better to have, this or this? Okay, well, let's write a list of all the pros for this and the cons for this, and the pros for this and the cons for this, and we'll weigh it up and we'll see which is the better decision. The thinking mind is very logical and rational. The mind is the realm of logic and rationality. The soul, on the other hand, is more emotional. And it's, I know I have 10 ticks in the plus column for this and only 5 ticks in the plus column for that, but oh, I'd love that. I don't know why, but I'd fucking love it. And it's your gut, essentially. Because whereas the mind, I think for the most part, not exclusively, but I think for the most part, the mind is in your head. Like, if you ask somebody, where do your thoughts come from? Like, they'll say your brain. Now, your brain is widely distributed throughout your body, but when most people say your brain, they mean the bit that's encased in the skull up here. Like, where do your thoughts come from? They come from up here. But if you ask somebody, where do your feelings come from? They're much more likely to say fucking way lower down. Like that, like, we literally have a term for this, your gut feeling. And what that reminds me of is your whole gut microbiome and how your diet is so important to how you think and feel. There's some more fucking food for thought for me. And I'm at my next destination, so on that note, I'll chat to you soon.